it's a big part of why I love building businesses, because I feel like you're never done learning. I also feel like a company's always a work in progress. You're never done, and there's always things to improve. And so I think it's very much that spirit. And frankly, I think if I lost it, I think then I'd probably be like, hey, it's probably time for me not to be running a company. I also guess what makes companies successful, right, is you're celebrating the wins. And yes, we're an Inc. 500 list. We also know internally we got thousands of problems to solve and we need to be better. And so it's kind of that unique combination of entrepreneurship. You're celebrating the wins, you're growing, but you're also seeing, wow, I have all these problems and headaches, and how do I get better? How does the team get better? And that's really what I think is exciting about entrepreneurship.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Let's go back to the beginning. When you were putting together your company, did you think about the product first and the problem you're solving? Or did you think about the culture that you wanted to create? Well, most companies, when I say most, probably 99 out of 100, would say, of course, it has to be about solving the problem. That's what we're here to do, is solve a problem. We have to create a product that solves a problem. And I get that. But when I talk to today's guest, he actually looked at this differently. We're going to be looking at culture. We're going to be looking at how you create a sense of entrepreneur spirit inside the company, but also how do you evolve as a leader? Our guest today is Godard Abel. He's the co-founder of G2. They're a software company that has changed the dynamics of how you can actually interact with your software company, if you will. We talk about the importance of culture. We talk about that entrepreneur spirit, what it is, what it means. Is it related to innovation? But we also talk about his own evolution as a leader. We get really real about some of the things that are going on inside of his company, but today we share with you that story of G2. Before we jump into the interview, if you haven't already got the training about how to create a team of A players, make sure you do that now. All you have to do is go to genehammett.com/training. That will take you straight into how do you create a team of A players. We highlight the 3 mistakes that often get in the way, how do you fix them, and all that in under 30 minutes. Absolutely free. Just go to genehammett.com/training. Now here's Godard. Godard, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Gene?
Fantastic. Excited to have you here on the podcast to talk about growth and leadership. Would love for you to give us a little bit of insight around G2 and what you guys do.
Yeah, and G2, we really aim to be the place you go for software, and especially for business people, for entrepreneurs. We want to build one site where you can get all the insights you need to find the best software for your business. And we're really inspired by consumer sites. We know sites like Yelp, like TripAdvisor, like Amazon. And we always thought it's just way too hard to shop for business software. And we wanted to make it much like those consumer experiences, more like shopping on Amazon.
Well, that is hard to do when you think about programming. I've worked in the technical side since the beginning of the internet, probably around 95. Really big projects, worked with a lot of the e-commerce stuff as it was coming on board in the early 2000s. When you got into this, I know that you wanted to grow a company. Give us an idea of kind of starting out. What were you setting your sights on?
Yeah, and I think, Gene, like you, have been in business software now since the late 90s, and lived through that .com bubble and bust and all of that. But I think what really inspired us in 2012, when we were starting G2, was really my frustration as an entrepreneur. And my first company was called Big Machines. We were selling configure, price, quote software. Eventually the company was acquired by Oracle, but it took us a long time and very hard journey. We almost went bankrupt and before we really started growing. But one of my biggest frustrations as an entrepreneur was it was hard for me to reach my customers, and it was really hard for them to discover me, because we were kind of creating a new niche in the software industry, CPQ software. And I remember distinctly one of our first big customers was Rolls-Royce, and they manufacture big gas and steam turbines. So kind of perfect for Big Machines, because we started for companies like that. But I remember they met us in, like 2006. And they said, one of the first things they said was, wow, we wish we'd known you existed sooner, because we're trying to develop this software in-house. And I think the reality is business software is quite a complex industry, right? But it's super hard for software buyers to discover the right apps to solve their business problems. And that's really what we wanted to set out to do when we started G2 back in 2012.
And fast forward to today, I know that you made the Inc. list in 2019 at number 408. You've made it again. This will come out after the formal announcement. So we're recording it before you can really announce it. But I wanted to just kind of give a view of the business. It's over 20 million in revenue from 2019. I don't need to know specifics, but employees are around 350 million. Is that kind of where you still are?
Yeah, we have about 250 employees, and we are, about a 50 million revenue run rate today.
Okay.
And so we are continuing to grow, and so that has been an exciting ride.
When you think about scaling to that size, it takes a different style of leadership. At certain points, you can't be the same leader that you were at 20 employees and even 50 employees. It's getting harder as the company grows. What are some of the challenges you've had to overcome in this journey of leadership?
Yeah, and I think you're right, Gene. I think I've been still learning my leadership style needs to evolve, as the company gets bigger. And I think especially as an entrepreneur in those early days, in the beginning of the first day, there were 5 of us, but in those days, I think you're very hands-on and it's all about speed and just doing stuff. And I feel like now at 350, it's really shifted where it's more around setting vision, aligning teams. And I think probably one of my biggest lessons is I've also brought in new leaders. Earlier this year, I brought in a new chief product officer, Sarah Rossio, and just a couple months ago, I brought in a new chief revenue officer, Mike Weir. And Mike came from LinkedIn, and he'd spent 10 years there helping scale that business from when it was pretty small to obviously now multi-billion-dollar business. And so I found that's really helped me, is bringing a couple leaders that have that next level scale experience. What I've noticed about them, they manage very differently. In the beginning, it almost seems like they go a little slower. They'll take more time to listen to the team and listen to customers, build consensus and get alignment, before moving forward. And frankly, I think now with 350 employees, that turns out to work much better. I want to go faster, but then sometimes I'll just start working on something and frankly, the team isn't behind it, doesn't understand it, isn't aligned to it. And then, it doesn't have the impact we hope. And so I think that's a shift I'm working on right now, is going to kind of a more mature, seasoned leadership style.
Well, one of the things that you said in there about evolving as a leader, I went through my own struggles with my company, and we only got to about 15 employees, but I've seen it with my clients too. When you think about your journey of leadership, are you actively looking for these places to grow, or do you have to play catch up at certain times?
Well, and I try to get ahead of it, but I still find myself learning new things. And after 20 plus years, I still make new mistakes. So I'm still always learning, but I have become more conscious about learning. And one of the organizations I joined over a decade ago is YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And what I've loved about that is, they have peer forums where you're meeting with peer company leaders, once a month or so. And it's really kind of a peer therapy group ultimately. But I think from that group, I think they really helped me. And some of them have run and built bigger businesses, so I think they helped me kind of anticipate some of the personal and leadership challenges I'll face and hopefully get ahead of it more. And as I also mentioned earlier, through that group, I got introduced to a coach, conscious leadership coach that I've been working with now over a decade. And so I think with coaching and a peer group, I try to anticipate leadership challenges better than I could on my own.
Well, let me ask you a question about that before we jump into the heart of today's topic, which is around creating a culture with an entrepreneurial spirit. You've invested in coaching over the years. You've invested in this peer group through YPO and probably even other things that we haven't talked about. Why do you continue to investment? Is there a point where you say, you know what, I got enough, I just need to execute? Or do you just continue to invest because it pays off in the long run?
Yeah, I think it does pay off. And I do think it's better for the business for me to keep growing, and I need to keep growing. And frankly, but also personally, it's a big part of why I love building businesses, because I feel like you're never done learning. And I also feel like a company's always a work in progress. You're never done, and there's always things to improve. And so I think it's very much that spirit. And frankly, I think if I lost it, I think then I'd probably be like, hey, it's probably time for me not to be running a company. Because I also think that's what makes companies successful, right? Is you're celebrating the wins, and yes, we're on the Inc. 500 list. We also know internally we got thousands of problems to solve, and we need to get better. And so it's kind of that unique combination of entrepreneurship. You're celebrating the wins, you're growing, but you're also seeing, wow, I have all these problems and headaches, and how do I get better? How does the team get better? And that's really what I think is exciting about entrepreneurship.
Well, thanks for sharing part of that journey with us today, Godard. I want to talk about the real reason why we came here is my research team is always looking for interesting stories about what makes companies grow. We're always looking at leadership and culture. We found you. The real story behind this was something around this entrepreneur spirit. I don't want to put words in your mouth. What is an entrepreneur spirit inside of an organization that has, 200 plus employees?
Yeah, and I think one thing that was unique about G2, the second company we built, I think one thing we did that was maybe abnormal was I met with 4 of my co-founders. We decided we built our first company, Big Machines, together. It was bought by Oracle. we decided, and after we took a break, but we kind of realized we missed building companies. And I think it was unique. We got together in my basement, and before we talked about what's the business problem we're going to solve, what are we going to build, we actually talked about what culture we want. And I think that was a unique situation as second-time entrepreneurs. And frankly, we also had the luxury of having had some success, so we could go a little slower. But I think we also realized for ourselves, like, why build another company? And we really wanted to create a company where we could work with joy. And so we first talked about how do we define a culture. And luckily at that time, I met a really cool entrepreneurial leader, Chip Conley. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote a book on peak cultures. He built a company called Joie de Vivre, a very successful boutique hotel chain in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then he later went on to become the head of hospitality for Airbnb. So a very accomplished entrepreneur. But he really wrote this book called Peak and Peak Cultures that do enable companies to both succeed and work with joy. And so we all read that book, and I met him at a conference right around that time. And that really helped us define our culture from day one.
Hold it for a second. Did you just catch what Godard said about defining the culture before they define the problem they're solving? Granted, this is not their first business, but when you think about your culture, when did it come? Was it after 20 employees, 50 employees, closer to 100, maybe even 200? The earlier you start on defining the culture, the more advantage you will have to create something that's meaningful, a place that people are attracted to, talented people, and they want to stay, they want to innovate. And if you create that and you live by everything inside there, you have a chance to create something that really will last and do the test of time, if you will. When Godard shared that with me, I've never heard it before, starting with culture before you actually started the business. So I really think that's a strong way to look at how you want to grow something meaningful. Now back to the interview.
So I want to make sure I got that right. Before you decided what problem you're going to solve, you defined the kind of culture you wanted as an organization.
Yes. We spent probably a week in my basement kind of debating it. And frankly, my wife was kind of like, what's wrong with you guys? Because this was in the summer in Chicago, and we're all down there kind of scruffy in shorts and t-shirts. It's like with like some flip charts I brought in, and just kind of brainstorming, talking. We did a group meditation, but all trying to figure out, hey, what do we really want our culture to be? And that was also selfish in that, how do we create a company we all really want to keep working for?
I love that. And it really is an odd thing. I ask you to bring some counterintuitive kind of stuff, but you define the culture before you really define the business and the business model, the problem you're solving. I know that it helps to have already had some successes before, but when you go back, do you ever think that was the wrong approach to this?
No, I mean, I think it was 100% the right approach. And I think we still try to hold ourselves accountable to today. We have now better defined what peak culture means. We've turned it into a mnemonic that encompasses our 4 values. And I think we still measure it in our performance feedback, upward feedback. Hey, are we really living to that culture? And it does take reminding ourselves, because it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day of a business and kind of forget, why you started in the first place. And so now it's something I think we really try to embody in the culture. But like I said, also keep measuring myself, my leadership team. Hey, are we really living up to those peak values? And are we really working with joy?
Hold on for a second. He just talked about living the values. Let me ask you a question. Now, this is something that might trigger you, but are you truly living by the values of the organization? You have those words, maybe they're on the wall, maybe they're just written down in some notebook somewhere. Maybe you had a meeting or a kickoff and talked about the values. But are you saying that you live them every day? Would your employees say that you're living them every day? Well, one of the things I know about fast growth companies is more than 85% of the time, they are living the values. They have rituals around the values, and they live them every day. Everyone knows what they are. There's no question what's expected of them. Many of those companies are paying performance bonuses based on the adherence to the values and how they organize. Even one company said 50% of your bonus is how you adhere to one of our values. What are you doing as a leader? How important are the values to your organization? In my opinion, they're critical for you to create the kind of culture where people feel connected and are really doing the kind of work that allows the company to grow. Back to the interview.
Well, back to the question I originally asked, what is a culture with an entrepreneurial spirit?
Right. And that's why I talked about peak, because the E, I mentioned it's a mnemonic. So the P stands for performance. The E is entrepreneurial spirit. the A is authenticity, the K is kindness, and that E, that entrepreneurial spirit. We realized also at the beginning, our last company growing about 300 employees. So we kind of saw that it was hard to keep that spirit. Obviously, with 5 of us in a room, everyone's entrepreneurial. But we also said, hey, let's build it in the culture. Let's define what it means so that, now when we have 350 people, we train them on it. And we've actually built in specific tools to reinforce that entrepreneurial spirit as we keep growing.
Let's look at some of those tools that you have. What's one of those that you feel like kind of moves the needle for you?
Yeah, and there's a couple. And I think one cool one is we've built something called G2 Labs. And this goes back to our very beginning, because like I said, we didn't know what we were going to build. We just knew we wanted to work together and have a great P culture. And so we first actually called the company G2 Labs, g2labs.net. And then we figured out what we wanted to do, which was the idea I shared at the beginning. We wanted to disrupt the business software industry, make it really easy to buy business software like Yelp. And then we changed the company name to G2 Crowd, eventually G2.com. But then we just brought back G2 Labs. And we put our co-founder, Mike Wheeler, our founding CTO, in charge of it. And what G2 Labs is meant to do is work like that 5-person startup. And now our whole team can pitch ideas to Mike he does about 4 to 6 week sprint cycles, but they all pitch ideas to him. And then he picks the ideas that he thinks is obviously most innovative and also, will really move the needle on the business. And then he will actually go and code it, within 4 weeks, prototype it and get it live. And that was one of our other founding mantras, is do it live. But we kind of realized, because our core engineering product team now is, 80, 100 people, and figure they can't move as fast anymore in innovations. And so now we said, let's build G2 Labs and let that be kind of our incubator so we can still innovate like a 5-person company.
What's the purpose behind that? I know you talk about innovation, but you have this segment of, almost 80 engineers, then you have a small team of kind of that's really trying to get this startup feel to it. But what's the purpose behind that?
And I think like Mike, our co-founder, loves doing it. That's why he joined us in the first place. But I also think the purpose is just speed, because the reality is, to manage an 80-person team, we have now a brilliant chief product officer, Sarah Rossio, I mentioned, right? But we have process and discipline. And frankly, to ship a new feature might take 3 to 6 months, and to really do it at scale. And what Mike can do, and he's hacking a bit, so it's not as robust yet, but he can get, a whole new feature live in 4 weeks. And so I think it's really that speed. And I think also the team, though, it's all driven by team ideas. So we kind of think we get the best of both, where every team member can submit the best ideas. And then, Mike can pick an idea and bring it to life in 4 weeks. And I think that really keeps us acting like that 5-person startup.
Is there anything else you do, with the whole group of the company? It could be individually, it could be with other groups like this, but that you really are trying to encourage this entrepreneur spirit?
Yeah, and I think we have, like I said, it's also defined in our culture and we train on it. I think we're also very conscious about, having them understand what it means. And part of it is always continuously questioning the status quo and, encouraging everyone to proactively seek out change. But we also teach people, hey, you kind of have to earn the right to do that. So you first have to master your craft. And, day one, when you're a new team member at G2, you first, let's say you want to innovate on our sales process. Hey, before you innovate on it, learn the existing process, right? Become best in class at it, really learn the best demo. And once you've mastered that process, now you're in a position to disrupt it and share ideas how to make it much better. And so it's really also teaching the team, kind of both parts. Hey, you have to master how we're doing things today, but then as you're doing it, question it and find a way to do it much better. And I think in addition to G2 Labs, we also have an ideas portal, and probably many companies have that now, but there's a G2 ideas where they can then also say, hey, I think the sales process would be much better if we automated this part of the demo. And so we're also always, have that mechanism where they can share the ideas, and then those ideas are upvoted, and our product managers will review every idea. So there's also an outlet, for their ideas and spirit to keep flowing.
If you're listening on YouTube right now, I wanted to start off by thanking you. Thank you for coming back to these videos. Maybe this is your first one, but if you happen to have been around for a while and you appreciate content like this, make sure that you hit the thumbs up, give us a notification that you like it, but also subscribe. We want to make sure you don't miss an episode. We want to keep creating content, and this helps the algorithm with us creating content that will help you be the leader that your team deserves. Now back to the interview.
So we've been talking about, what really helps drive growth for the company. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you feel like would be important for you to share with other founders and team leads?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing I learned the hard way, my first company, Big Machines, and we were almost bankrupt after 3 years. And figuring my training, like in school, I was more of an engineer, then I was an MBA and consultant. So figuring mindset, I was too theoretical. And kind of what I learned the hard way 3 years in, I'm like, wow, if we don't sell something, we're out of business. So I had to become the sales leader for the company. And I really had to learn, and we're always in B2B businesses, but especially B2B businesses, you have to learn how do you sell to a peer executive, how do you communicate value, and so ultimately we really bottled that up. And my second company, Steelbook, was acquired by Salesforce, and that was where I also really saw with Mark Benioff. I think one of the rules they have at Salesforce is, hey, at least 20% of the company has to be quota-carrying sales reps. And so I think for any founder, you really have to learn, you need a lot of sales reps. How do you scale that? How do you motivate them? And how do you bottle up in a process that's repeatable? But I just think that importance of being sales, being able to sell yourself, and being able to be a sales leader, I think is a skill that I, being more technical, had to learn, and I think every founder needs to learn.
I went through a similar journey. I came from that technical background, and the only difference was I knew sales was important, and many of the opportunities I was working in, they wouldn't allow me because, hey, you're a good project manager. You need to, kind of sit still and just enjoy that. And I was like, no, this is what I really wanted to do. So I appreciate you sharing that piece of your journey with us. Godard, really appreciate you being on the podcast, sharing your wisdom. Thanks for being here.
No, thank you, Gene. It was fun.
What a great interview. I love talking about evolving as a leader. Even someone who's over 50 million run rate and 250 employees sees we've got to evolve. Godard continues to invest in coaching. And so my question back to you is, at what point will you invest in yourself to be the leader that your team deserves? As you grow a company, it really is about you evolving as a leader, more so than about selling more widgets or services or products or innovation and disrupting. It's about you being the leader that drives that. I say that from a whole heart because I went through these struggles myself without evolving. And this is what I do now. I've dedicated my life to leaders just like you, helping them be stronger, more visionary, strategic leaders when they need to be, and to really see what they can't see for themselves. If there's a way that I can help you and serve you, make sure you reach out to me, gene@genehammett.com. When you think of leadership and you think of growth, make sure you think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage.